He who digs a hole for others all too often finds himself inside of it. This is a truism that the modern-day progressive movement finds itself falling afoul of all too often recently. After 2 decades now of pushing for ever more stringent and strident censorship means and ever more centralized forms of censorship as well, particularly around things like sexuality, the jaws have started to tighten around their own backsides, to everyone's shock and surprise, I have no doubt, and, well, frankly, considering that the entire progressive movement is basically based on degeneracy, this always seemed like a bit of a bad idea. And we have a beautiful recent example of it right here. Valve isn't interested in a nuanced conversation, says perverted man who likes to call his fetish political rather than what it is, a fetish. As well, he wanted to make a political gay game and was then shocked and terrified to realize that Valve, who has been forced to introduce more and more stringent means of censorship and control on adult games and products, well, considered his game about gay, naked dudes to also be adult. Shock and surprise. Much rimming proceeds, as PC Gamer is very much so a fan of gay romance games, of course. But there's more. In a recent blog on the experience of putting together Radiator Forever, which is this thing, incidentally, I'm feeling a pinch nervous even bringing it up on screen, Yang shone some light on the ongoing fallout from last year's purge of adult material from storefronts like Steam and itch.io from right-wing anti-porn group Collective Shout. Ah yes, you may remember this. I mentioned already when it was happening that the left would try to claim that Collective Shout was right-wing. You know, the organization with the senior lecturer in the Center for Culture and Ethics here, and also the founder of the Feminist Academy of Technology and Ethics, the woman who wrote a book explaining how literal plastic is a danger to women. You'll be seeing a lot more of this in the next few decades as well, incidentally, but yes, the right-wing censorship group. No, what is happening here isn't that the right wing are censoring you. These aren't conservatives. Oh my god, no. This is merely an offshoot of your own political movement that is more radical than yourself. Again, the left wing was originally based largely of, well, shock value and gross nonsense, like period blood paintings and making little statues out of birthing cakes and other fanciful things. But as this grows more and more degenerate, it falls afoul of more and more of its own censorship. And unfortunately as well, this is still male sexuality, and we really don't like that either. After putting pressure on payment processors as well as on impact of regional censorship laws like the UK Online Safety Act. Yet again, a very much so right-wing country and government there, the United Kingdom. With indie storefront itch.io forced more or less shadow ban adult games on its platform, projects like Yang's are impossible to find on there, driving him back to Steam. Of course, I will continue using and supporting itch as much needed alternative to Steam, but the cold fact is that itch reaches a lot fewer people these days. Oh no! You're being censored? You're being kept from the front page because of making a porn game? Wow, that truly is terrible. But even on Steam, these sort of games continue to run into problems. Unfortunately, Valve has tagged my game as frequent nudity and sexual content, and now hides it from most Steam users, writes Yang. Since no one changed their default setting, this amounts to a delisting/shadow ban from 99% of the Steam user base. So, just again, this right here is the video game that apparently does not deserve the frequent nudity and sexual content tag. I don't know about that. I'm pretty sure this is sexual content, and here's the thing, I have no problems with that. If I was in charge, instead of your own puritanical fucking zealots, This would be perfectly allowed. You'd be allowed to have your porn game on Steam like everyone would be allowed to have their porn games on Steam. As again, porn tends to be the canary down the coal mine. When it gets censored, you know that your site has reached too much power and is now beginning to purity spiral. That is what is happening right now. While I was careful to avoid explicit nudity, compliance in advance is never enough to appease a zealous censor. And the Steam content reviews have decided the game's general nature was just too gay. No, again, here's the thing. It's not too gay. It's too much of a porn game to survive the left wing's censorship regulations. As, let me remind you, sexualization of women and male sexuality more broadly in general was literally the thing that fired off this entire cultural conflict in general. Because our position, in fact, my entire generation grew up as rebels against conservative censorship of conservative Christianity, and we made sexy games and sexy content explicitly as an act of revolt against that which we viewed as an oppressive religious force, only to replace it years later with another oppressive religious force. Your game was not censored for being too gay, it was censored for being too sexual, and you expected the gay tag to shield you, because this was the hole you dug, but you assumed because it wasn't a gay hole, you would not fall into it. Here's the problem, there is no interest, as you say, in a nuanced debate on this topic. There never has been, and there never will be. You are never going to be able to sit down payment processors, or even Steam or anybody else, and try to discuss the nuanced differentials of porn games. And in this case, your politics provides you with absolutely no shield, as you expected to be granted a privileged position in this new ecosystem. As he admits here, if the games are a form of protected free speech, I do wish there was a bit more hand-wringing over blocking access to my games that were designed directly to be political speech. See, this is the thing. On the one hand, being gay is nothing strange or unusual, it's entirely natural, you can't help it, it just occurs. That is the left-wing position. On the other hand, it is simultaneously the left-wing position that being gay is inherently political and obviously left-wing, which is what this is. It's having your cake and eating it too. I want to ban all explicit games. However, not my explicit games, because my fetishes are political. No, it's not protected. You attempted to create a system of laws and regulations that would only benefit yourself, but in so doing, you failed to carve out the niche exceptions that you needed, probably because it would have made you sound even more ridiculously authoritarian than you already did. It is an eminently understandable frustration and a reminder that though the discourse around last year's censorship at online storefronts has died down, the reactionary crusade against adult content continues to impact creators. The reactionary crusade. Again, reactionaries. No, this is simply just part and parcel of what is currently socially acceptable. On the one hand, you've got shit like this, which is just smut from page 1, literally page 1, with descriptions of giant throbbing cow cocks, to the very last page, with nothing but explicit handjobs, seams of ball sacks and pulsating fluids the entire way through. This is socially acceptable. This is okay. This is female romance. Meanwhile, the exact opposite in males literature, for example, is still stigmatized and viewed as lesser, as smut, as disgusting and unclean, even if it is, and oh god, it is, infinitely more wholesome than the female equivalent. This is precisely why I like to bring on harem-lit authors onto my channel to talk about male romance, because it is not even in the same ballpark as female romance. Female romance is about sex, fucking, being used, and literally, amusingly enough considering, being reduced to a pair of hands under a table with a face mask on. Whereas the male equivalent is more often than not about achieving things and building something worth actually building. He also complains about things like Baldur's Gate here as well. It's like, oh, it's fine when Baldur's Gate and Cyberpunk does it. Again, there's a little bit of a difference there. Baldur's Gate is probably the spicier of the two, and it certainly is the more degenerate as well, but even there, you can't actually see the bear actively cornholing the little pale elf. Because, guess what? That too would actually be porn. Much like, your game. So no, you cannot have your cake and eat it too. And the very fact that the sword is now beginning to cut both ways is yet another wonderful indicator that the grip of the progressive movement over the mainstream is faltering more and more every day. They can no longer shield wholly behind their politics. It cannot protect them anymore. They are no longer the sacred cows. The laws and the rules are now being applied across the board. And again, those rules are gonna suck for everyone involved for quite some time. In my ideal world, he'd be free to peddle his political gay game however he wished, right alongside a dozen titles with giant-titted anime women riding beasts of war into combat in bikini armor. That's the future I've always wanted. That's the future the left took from us due to their own need to heighten their own particular brand of degeneracy rather than anybody else's, and this is the consequence. I grew up cheering for the death of censors. I will apparently die cheering for the death of censors. At least they keep dying. That's the bright side of it. Oppressive asshole tyrants have never been particularly popular and won't ever be particularly popular. And on that bright and happy note, I say, good job, Valve. And to the rest of you, thank you very much for watching, and have a very good day.